Hi, welcome to the second lecture on Hamlet in a series of 12 lectures. I watched my first lecture and it wasn't too terribly bad for my first attempt at teaching online. As you know, I'm used to being in the classroom and moving about, and you know how I like to doodle on the board, so I'll be patient with me. I'll try to improve. Um, but training wheels on this bicycle still uh, are in place, I'm afraid. So, at any rate, I did want to make a few corrections. I misspoke. Uh, from what I can see, I misspoke twice on the during the first lecture. The first correction was when I was speaking about the realistic worldview of the universe, and I was talking about how realists see the universe as a mechanical process that's constantly unfolding, and it's not conscious, it's not intelligent, and everything in the universe can be reduced ultimately to space and to energy bits and matter bits. Two types of energy bits and two types of matter bits, and two types of interaction. The energy bits here, let me just two types of energy bits. So you have the proton energy bit and the electron energy bit. And then you have two types of matter bits. You have the proton matter bit and the electron matter bit. And the energy bits don't interact with each other. And the matter bits don't interact with each other. I said in the first video that matter interacts with matter, but it really doesn't. The energy bits interact with the matter bits. I don't know how important that is, but um, that's the theory according to draft science, and it's I think the best theory in physics uh, because first of all of its simplicity. There are only two types of energy bits, only two types of matter bits, and two types of interaction. And second of all, because it can explain the manifestations of force that we can observe, such as the three manifestations of force: gravity, and magnetism, and light. And what we observe in the universe, draft science rationally deduces from that observation these basic these essential, these fundamental laws in the universe. So, at any rate, what's important to understand is that the realist doesn't believe the universe is conscious or intelligent, or that there are any gods operating from a supernatural world in the universe. Um, Also, when I was talking about faith versus reason, I misspoke and I said that faith was holding a belief based on scientific evidence and philosophical, the philosophical truths that can be derived from that evidence. What I meant to say was reason is based on scientific evidence, scientific observation, the scientific data. And from that data, we can rationally deduce these philosophical truths. Faith, remember, by definition, is holding a belief without any scientific evidence or philosophical proof, um, whereas reason says that truth can be determined based on, beyond a reasonable doubt, we can ascertain the truth. We can ascertain important truths. Uh, uh, through the scientific data. And when you add that data up, you ultimately arrive at the philosophical truths. So philosophy is, as I've mentioned in class, philosophy is actually a subcategory of science. Um, what else from that first video? Oh yes, the computer cut me off at the end when I was just about to mention the most important reason for Shakespeare beginning his play with the great line, "Who's there?" Um, and so I mentioned that one of the reasons Shakespeare uh, opens the play with these lines is that he is creating he's setting a tone. He's creating an atmosphere of suspense. And I left you in suspense when the computer cut me off. Um, so just to recap very very quickly here, uh, he is opening. The play does open uh, uh, by creating this particular mood, a mood of suspicion and suspense. And in addition, it raises that issue of knowing the other mind. The question, who's there? That's a question that Hamlet is going to be asking of all the other characters in the play. He wants to understand, he's trying to understand what it is they're thinking and what it is they're feeling, and trying to comprehend why they're behaving the way they're behaving. And of course, the other characters in the play, as well as you and me, as sitting in the audience, we want to know what Hamlet is thinking. We want to understand who's there, why Hamlet, what motivates Hamlet, why is he acting the way he's acting. But the most important reason for this opening, the question of who's there, I think, is that Shakespeare is addressing you and me in the audience, sitting in the audience, and he's asking us directly who's there. He is aware that how each of us interprets the play that we're about to see is going to say something about uh, our particular understanding of who we are and our place in the universe and what kind of place the universe is. It's going to reveal something about ourselves. And remember, the first day of class, I said, taking this class, studying these plays, it's ultimately, you're ultimately studying you. You're ultimately trying to understand who you are and to what it is you want to do with your life, need to do with your life, how you can best operate in the world, how you can be productive, what sort of contribution can you make to civilization. So, at any rate, try to clear those matters up. So I can put that aside now. Let's turn then to the play, and I'd like to begin at Act 1, Scene 2, and this is often referred to by critics and scholars as the court scene. So you can refer to this act and scene in your essay as the court scene, if you like. I'm on page, the eyes are the first to go. I'm on page 1402. And this is the court scene. We have the king and the queen uh, at the palace of Elsinore, and they're surrounded by the rest of the people at court, known as the courtiers. And Claudius has been elected king of Denmark, I believe, and I would imagine it's while Hamlet was away at the university at Wittenberg. Claudius manages to get himself elected king of Denmark. And so when Hamlet returns, he finds that Claudius is not only king, but that Claudius has also married Hamlet's mother, Gertrude. And Claudius is obviously a political man. He speaks before the court and takes care of political business as well as personal business. And then he finally turns to Hamlet. And this is the first time that we see Hamlet. I'm on page 1402. This again is Act 1, Scene 2. And I'm at line, let's see. Yes, I'm at line 64. So the king takes care of all the business at hand, and then he turns to Hamlet. And at line 64, he says, "And now, my cousin Hamlet and my son." And Hamlet's first lines are in an aside. Remember, an aside is a theatrical convention. It's asking us to suspend our disbelief Hamlet speaks this line, and we're to assume that no one on the stage can hear what he says, although we sitting in the audience can hear what he's saying. But it's the idea that he's muttering these words under his breath, and no one around him on stage can hear his words. So the king says, "And now, my cousin Hamlet and my son." And Hamlet responds, "A little more than kin and less than kind." I apologize. One of my doggies is here. All right, boo boo. Be gone. Be gone. All right. A little more than kin and less than kind. Interesting. This very first aside, Hamlet. You can sense that with these words that Hamlet is resentful. He's bitter towards Claudius. He doesn't like his uncle, does he? He's punning on the words kin and kind, isn't he? When he says a little more than kin, remember that Claudius has just referred to Hamlet as his son. Claudius is now Hamlet's stepfather. And for Hamlet, that's just a little too close for comfort. Hamlet is saying, in essence, "You're not my father. Don't assume that you are. I had a father. My father's dead, and you can't replace him. You're a little more than kin. That's too close. That relationship that you're trying to establish with me, it isn't going to happen. It's too close. A little more than kin and less than kind." So you see, Hamlet's punning on the words kin and kind. And Hamlet's really quite creative with language. He's quite the punster. He likes to quibble with words. And he's very clever. He's very witty when it comes to his use of language. And kind here, of course, we understand the sense kind in the sense of good or generous or thoughtful, but it's also in the sense of you could think of kind as you're less than this. We're not even of the same species, Claudius. You're altogether different species. You're less than kind. We're different kinds of species here. So right off, you see that Hamlet is harboring some resentment, some hostility toward Claudius. As of yet, we don't know why. We could speculate. Perhaps Hamlet is resentful that Claudius has managed to maneuver his way to the throne while Hamlet was away at school. Um, Hamlet does see Claudius as a man who's self interested, a man who's politically ambitious, who cares primarily for his own gain, who wishes to acquire power, to gain power and control, and to enjoy all of the privileges that come with power. And Hamlet doesn't wish to see himself as ambitious, although it's obvious that Hamlet is an ambitious man as well. In fact, throughout the play, later in the play, Hamlet himself will uh, admit that he is ambitious, but he he has to deny to himself. He has to suppress his ambitious desires because it doesn't it conflicts with his Christian upbringing. Remember, Hamlet is a Christian prince, and he has been taught that to renounce uh, to renounce material wealth and the pleasures of this world. It's the world to come that is what matters, and not this world is seen as a kind of testing ground, a crucible, a test to see if one is worthy of ultimately, uh, you know, an eternal life in the Christian heaven. So Hamlet, I think the point here to underscore is that Hamlet just really despises his uncle Claudius. It's interesting to see how Claudius is usually cast. as not a particularly attractive person. I think if I were to cast the play, I would choose an actor who was very good looking and who exuded charm and someone who is charismatic, the kind of man who, when he walks in a room, heads turn. And Claudius is a smooth operator. He enjoys life. He enjoys his pleasures. He enjoys drinking, and he really is someone who is uh, able to manipulate people and to use them for his own purposes, but to do so in a way that isn't apparent. So he's a great schemer, Claudius. So Hamlet responds a little more than kin and less than kind. And once again, notice that Hamlet's first line isn't an aside. Hamlet isn't able to speak openly and directly before the court and before the king and before his mother. He has to conceal. He has to suppress his feelings of hostility, his anger, his bitterness, and his resentment toward Claudius. He can't be open and honest and direct with Claudius. And the king then asks, "How is it that the clouds still hang on you?" And Claudius, of course, is speaking figuratively here, not literally. The idea, why are you still mourning the loss of your father? Why are you still so despondent, so uh, depressed? But Hamlet's response, here Hamlet responds out loud. And in his response, Hamlet acts as if Claudius was speaking the lines literally, because Hamlet responds, "Not so, my lord, I am too much in the sun." Circle that phrase, "too much in the sun." It's an interesting retort on Hamlet's part. This idea, the expression, of course, means that Hamlet is saying, "No, I've been out in the sun too long." He's taking Claudius's question literally, and to be too much in the sun is to be exposed to the elements, to be at some risk, to be in some danger. But Hamlet is also using these lines figuratively, which Claudius can't understand. No one can understand Hamlet. This idea of being too much in the sun. Once again, Hamlet's punning on the word sun. And Hamlet is saying, I'm too many sons here. You're claiming that you are my father, that I am your son, but I'm also the son of the elder King Hamlet, of my father who's now dead. And that's too many sons. I'm too much in the sun. And also, so again, it underscores Hamlet's dislike of Claudius. And it's also here that Hamlet is commenting that as the as the as the rightful heir to the throne, Hamlet realizes that he poses a threat to Claudius. Hamlet is too much in the sun. His life is in danger, which indicates that he understands the kind of man Claudius is, that Claudius will stoop to anything to maintain the power that he's acquired, and that Hamlet's life could actually be in danger. He, it's a kind of realization. Hamlet is stating that, that he realizes that his life is at risk, that he is in danger here. Of course, Claudius is not picking up on this, neither is anyone else in the court. But they are becoming uncomfortable. Hamlet is, when we first meet Hamlet, he is this solitary, isolated figure. Oftentimes in productions of the play, Hamlet is physically distanced from the rest of the court, from the king and the queen and the rest of the court, to underscore his emotional distance from everyone around him. He simply can't understand, he can't fathom, he can't comprehend why uh, uh, his mother and his uncle and the rest and the courtiers are uh, uh, how they could possibly forget his fathers so quickly, um, and how they are not suffering or grieving more for the loss of this great king. Um, so Hamlet is a kind of brooding presence and he's making everyone uncomfortable at court. Um, it's obvious to us that he is undergoing a psychological crisis. He is feeling traumatized by his father's death. And this brings up the first cause, the first deterministic cause I think you could explore in your essay, and that would be Hamlet's grief over the loss of his father, that it paralyzes him. It leaves him unable to move forward, to act, and to fulfill the mission that he will be given by the ghost. And there's much evidence in beginning here in the court scene in Act 1, Scene 2 that you could uh, use in explaining why this particular cause prevents Hamlet from uh, fulfilling his mission. And so his mother, everyone, as I said, Hamlet is making everyone uncomfortable. And his mother then turns to him. She interrupts Hamlet and the king, and she says, "Good Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off." And it's here we realize, if we're reading the play, it's here we realize that Hamlet is the only one at court who's still in mourning. He's dressed in all black, and he is a kind of figure of death here. Uh, Hamlet, in many of Shakespeare's plays, the tragic hero confronts death at the end of the play, but here Hamlet has confronted death before the play even begins. And Hamlet has, I would argue, in a sense, suffered a kind of figurative death, which we'll talk about in more detail. But he is the only character on the stage who is still dressed in black, who is still in his mourning clothes, and is still grieving over the loss of his father, the loss of the elder King Hamlet. Good Hamlet, cast thy nighted color off, and let thine eyes look like a friend on Denmark. And here she's reminding Hamlet, I think, when she says, uh, when she refers to the king as Denmark, she's reminding Hamlet that there's a particular loyalty, a particular duty that Hamlet owes to the state. And the king, being the head of the state, Hamlet owes his loyalty, his service to the king. And we recall also that this hierarchical order with the king, the monarch, as the head of the state, that it's a divine order. Um, uh, Remember, at this time, medieval Europe, all of Europe is uh, it's a Christian Europe, and the idea that kings derive their power from the Christian God, and that a king was in place, was on the throne because of the Christian God's desires or will or power. And so we have uh, uh, Gertrude is subtly reminding Hamlet here that he needs to move forward and he needs to respect his uncle and he needs to support the monarchy, support the state. And his king, as head of that state, is a symbol of Denmark, or is a symbol of the state hierarchy. Do not forever with thy veiled lid seek for thy noble father in the dust. Thou knowest 'tis common, all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. And here she's reminding Hamlet, you understand that this is part of the natural process. Gertrude's words, you could argue there's certainly a romantic view here, how she talks about death and dying itself. The realist would argue that dying is very often a very slow and painful process. Remember, as functioning organisms, we slowly, uh, as living organisms, we slowly, over the course of our lives, uh, move from a functional state to more and more dysfunctional state until finally we're no longer functioning altogether. And it's often, as I said, a very painful, slow and painful process, dying. And here she was a kind of, I don't know, a kind of superficial understanding, as I said, a kind of romantic view of dying and death. This idea that one passes through nature to eternity, from the natural world to the supernatural world. And it's a kind of passing, a kind of passage that one makes. Um, and also, her view of nature here is romanticized as well. Uh, the romantic, remember from A Midsummer Night's Dream, the romantic sees nature as a kind of benevolent uh, uh, force. It's often personified as a mother, someone who cares and protects and is concerned about the sentient, the living organisms, the conscious beings on the planet. This is not the realist view of the natural world, of course. Remember, the realist in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Shakespeare, Shakespeare's play is at pains to point out that the natural world is filled with all sorts of horrors, of natural diseases, natural disasters. We recall the votarist, the worshiper of Titania, who dies in childbirth. And then we remember the fairy blessing at the end of the play, where Shakespeare uh, talks about the number of children who come into the world with birth defects, and so we're constant, and we're also reminded about the horrors that the animals living in the natural world experience. And we discussed, for example, that 80 to 90% of all the uh, 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 among each species, 80 to 90% of the uh, uh, animals are they're brutally killed, uh, by other predators or by diseases. Uh, it's it's not this prettified picture that the realist is seeing when he or she looks at the natural world. The romantic tends to have see only a certain aspect of the natural world, focuses on only that which is pleasing and beautiful and lovely to behold. And there certainly is that in nature. You have the idea of lovely sunsets and beautiful scenes of mountains and so forth and so on, views of the ocean, etc. But the realist asks us to see all of nature, to look at the bigger picture, to take in a broader perspective of the natural world. And when one does so, one notices that what is of most importance in the natural world is the idea that there are feeling organisms that are suffering. That is what has far more value uh, than this superficial aspect of the beauty that nature can often produce, the beautiful images that nature can produce for us. So, yeah, I think Gertrude's response is a bit glib, if you will. It's rather superficial, um, unfeeling, perhaps. And the idea, she speaks of this passage uh, from this world to the next, that romantic view, remember that there is a world to come. She speaks about it as if it's just, it's just not particularly anything to become distressed over or difficult or to be terribly concerned about. Um, Hamlet's response when she says, that this is common, it happens to everyone. Hamlet's response is, "Aye, madam, it is common." So interesting response on Hamlet's part, isn't it? I think in one sense he's saying, yes, yes, I understand, it happens. But the way that you seem to be so unmoved by what has happened here, the way that you speak about dying and about death, that too, the way you're expressing it, to me, that is common, that's vulgar, it's something to be contemptuous of. Um, it's it's just it reveals that uh, your grief is not genuine or sincere. Uh, that the loss of your husband has not touched you deeply enough, hasn't moved you enough, that you appear to be unfeeling, and your reaction is common. It's low. Of course, again, Gertrude isn't understanding Hamlet's meaning here. Hamlet is speaking indirectly. He's accusing her indirectly of being unfeeling. Um, but again, I think Hamlet's actions and his appearance is making her uncomfortable, is making everyone around him uneasy. And the queen responds, if it be common, if you agree with me, Hamlet, if it be, why seems it so particular with thee? And Hamlet's going to latch on to that word seems. That word irks him, it irritates him, it really sets him off here. And he gives quite a lengthy speech here. He protests that what he's feeling, the grief over the loss of his father, his unhappiness at his father's death, is genuine, it's sincere. There's nothing phony about it. It isn't pretense, it isn't seems. Seems matter. You can kind of sense, right? He's taken aback by that word, seems matter, as if she's accusing him, right, of pretending, of not truly feeling the loss, truly suffering. Seems matter, nay, it is. I know not seems. He's saying, what I feel is sincere. It's heartfelt here. The loss that I'm experiencing. This runs deep. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother. And you can hear the irony, you can hear the venom, if you will, in that good mother. 'Tis not alone my inky cloak, good mother. Because in Hamlet's mind here, Gertrude, his mother, is anything but good because of the way, because of her behavior, because of her so quickly wanting to move on with her life after her husband's death. Is not alone my inky cloak, good mother, his mourning clothes, nor customary suits, my inky cloak, nor customary suits of solemn black. So again, he's this figure, a kind of figure of death, right? That's reminding everyone at court what has occurred just by his appearance here, nor customary suits of solid black, nor windy suspiration of forced breath, no, nor the fruitful river in the eye, nor the dejected haviour of the visage, together with all forms, moods, shapes of grief that can denote me truly. Saying, my clothes, my my sighs, my tears, uh, the depressed look on my face, all of these things together, all these forms of grief, all these moods, all these various moods that express grief, all these shapes of grief, all added together, they can't denote me truly. It would not be enough to really understand, to really show the depth of what I'm feeling, of what I'm experiencing. If you add all this together, it's still not enough. That what I'm feeling is genuine, is sincere. These indeed seem For they are actions that a man might play. Circle that, highlight that. These are actions that a man might play. This metaphor that Hamlet's using, the idea of a man might pretend to be in mourning, like an actor on a stage might pretend, right? The costuming, the clothes that the actor wears, the mourning suit and the inky cloak, the costumes, the props, the tears, the behavior, the actions, right? The sighs, the moans and the groans, all of this is the actor playing, pretending, right? Assuming a particular role. These indeed, right, these are indeed are actions that a man might play, an actor might play on the stage, perform on the stage. But I'm not an actor pretending here. This isn't a performance I'm giving, Mother. What you see is what you get. This is what is real to me. This is how I truly feel. For they are action, these indeed seem, for they are actions that a man might play. But I have that within which passes show. It's more than pretense. It's more than a facade. This isn't some sham, right? I'm not being, this isn't insincerity on my part. And again, you can see that Hamlet is underscoring this word I here. You can hear the bitterness. But I, as opposed to you and Uncle Claudius and the rest of the people at the court, I have something in me that's genuine, that's real, that's true. I have something in me that passes show, that's more than just pretending, that's more than just acting a part. But I have that within which passes show. These but the trappings and the suits of woe. What you see here are just the trappings, the suits of woe. There's something more. There's something beneath them that I am experiencing. Yeah, he is. As I said, he really is suffering over his father's death. And we're going to, I would contend that this causes Hamlet to delay. It's one of the factors, one of these deterministic features, causes that we're exploring in the play for Hamlet's delay in seeking vengeance for the death of his father. This is this paralyzing grief. But he can't express how he truly feels to those around him. He's reminded of the hierarchy, and he can't be open and direct. So, in a sense, if you think about it, there is a kind of irony here, isn't there, in Hamlet's grief, or Hamlet's how to say this? There is a kind of irony here. Hamlet is, in a sense, pretending, isn't he? Because he can't be open and honest. He can't tell his mother, and he can't tell the king, his uncle, and he can't tell the courtiers how he truly feels and or how he truly sees them, what he truly thinks about their behavior, their actions, how he sees them as heartless, as callous, as indifferent, and he can't come forward and express himself openly, directly. So, in a sense, he is performing. He is putting on a kind of show here. He can only indirectly accuse everyone around him. This raises another factor that you could explore in your essay, another causal factor for Hamlet's delay, and that is, everyone talks about the notorious delay in Hamlet seeking vengeance, and some critics even romanticize Hamlet and imagine, well, Hamlet is just not the kind of man that could, that could wish to revenge, that could desire revenge. He's not that kind of man. But I would argue that here Hamlet is already revenging himself on those around him. He's doing so indirectly, but he is punishing everyone. He is making everyone uncomfortable, making them squirm. They're all uneasy. And there's a part of Hamlet that's enjoying this, that's relishing this idea that he can accuse them indirectly, right? His punning, his quibbles with the language, right? And the speech to his mother here. So Hamlet, I would argue, is a man of vengeance, is a man of revenge. We see him already in the very first scene punishing those around him, not openly, but certainly, you know, uh, uh, indirectly. This could be a second cause you could explore is that Hamlet has a psychological desire, a need to hurt those, to harm those who have hurt him, and that who have dishonored his father's memory, who have desecrated his father's memory. And he goes about seeking vengeance in this very first opening scene. And it distracts him from the commandment, the ghost's commandment to come. It's going to distract him. He's going to want to spend time uh, uh, taking revenge, seeking, avenging himself on those around him who have hurt him so deeply, who have disappointed him so deeply. So the king steps in here again, once again, on the defensive. Everyone, the queen and the king are both on the defensive. They're trying to placate Hamlet. They're trying to calm him down. The king, in order to appease Hamlet, the king tries here, very long speech, to gently chastise Hamlet and to remind Hamlet again that it's the natural course of events for fathers to pass. And but you can see, you can sense that the king and the queen both are uncomfortable. Hamlet, and they are on the defense. They aren't being defensive here. They're on the defense here. At the bottom of page 1403, notice what the king says. Again, trying to mollify Hamlet, trying to appease him. The king says at line 110 or so, toward the bottom of page 1403. Let the world take note. So Claudius announces this before the court. Let the world take note. Let the world take note. You are the most immediate to our throne, and with no less nobility of love than that which dearest father hears his son, do I impart toward you. So Claudius makes this proclamation. He announces before the court that Hamlet is next in line to the throne. Remember, Claudius is very savvy. He's a very clever political man. And here I think the idea is that he sees Hamlet as a possible threat. Hamlet being the rightful heir to the throne, and Claudius having stepped in between the election and Hamlet, between the monarchy and Hamlet. Claudius sees Hamlet as a threat, and perhaps Claudius is imagining maybe Hamlet's acting this way because he really does resent not being king, not having assumed power, not having risen to the throne here. This could be one of the reasons why Hamlet's behaving the way he's behaving. And Claudius continues, he says, "For your intent in going back to school in Wittenberg, it is most retrograde to our desire." Claudius doesn't want Hamlet to return back to college, back to school, back to the university. Hamlet is a university student, and he, for I would imagine Hamlet wants to return to Wittenberg because he wants to just get away from the court. He wants to escape uh, uh, all those people around him, particularly Claudius, in particular Claudius, and especially his mother. He wants to get away from these people because they have so deeply disappointed him. Um, their behavior he finds quite disturbing. They're having forgotten so quickly this his father, this great king in Hamlet's mind, this former great king. And so Hamlet has plans to return to the university, and Claudius says, "Don't. We don't wish you to go back. It's retrograde to our desire. I desire you to stay here." And Claudius, I think, is being, he's thinking. It's the idea, you keep your friends close to you, but you keep your enemies closer. So Claudius is thinking that he wants to keep Hamlet at court so he can keep an eye on him. The idea, I'm speculating here, but it's certainly, it seems rational here that Claudius, feeling perhaps threatened by Hamlet, thinking that perhaps Hamlet might try to raise an army and rebel against the court and overturn the court and assume the throne. Uh, Hamlet needs to be watched, Claudius is thinking. He needs to keep Hamlet close at hand where he can keep an eye on him just in case. He doesn't want Hamlet to get control. And the best way to do that is to persuade Hamlet to stay at court where Claudius can keep a sharp eye on him. And his mother chimes in as well. Look what she says the next page, page 1404. Line 118, she says, "Let not thy mother lose her prayers, Hamlet. Let not thy mother lose her prayers. I pray thee," there's that word pray again, prayers and pray. "I pray thee, stay with us. Go not to Wittenberg. Let not thy mother lose her prayers." So her mother steps in and she's reminding Hamlet, she's sort of playing the mother card here, isn't she? In trying to persuade Hamlet, she's scheming as well. Now, why does she wish to keep Hamlet close? I would imagine she's concerned for her son. She loves Hamlet, she cares about him, and she doesn't understand why he's behaving the way he is. She's terribly concerned, she's worried, and she's anxious for him. And she wants him to remain near her so that she can help him, protect him, love him. And so she plays the mother card, if you will. Let not thy mother lose her prayer. She reminds Hamlet that she is his mother. And we recall that Hamlet is a Christian, and according to the cultural code of Christianity, which we'll talk about in some depth next time, that uh, one of the tenets of the code is that you should honor your mother, honor your father and mother, respect their wishes, obey them, listen to them. They are the authorities, right? They are your father and mother because, again, the Christian God, an all powerful God, an all knowing God, has decided that this is right the hierarchical order. It's a divine order. It's divinely ordained, this particular order. And so, Gertrude being Hamlet's mother, he should respect her wishes. He should not disobey her. Don't sass back. Do as your mama asks, right? That's the idea here. I pray thee. And this idea of prayer and praying, prayers and praying, again, is this idea. Remember, you're a good Christian boy. Remember your mother. I pray thee, stay with us. Go not to Wittenberg. And Hamlet's response is, I shall in all my best obey you, madam. Of course, you can always emphasize that word you. I shall in all my best obey you, madam. Because it's interesting, the king makes this long speech attempting to persuade Hamlet not to return to the university. And his mother says two lines. And Hamlet, in response, turns to his mother and says, I shall obey you. I shall in all my best obey you, madam. Right? It's a kind of, uh, it's kind of, again, a kind of attack, an indirect attack, Hamlet, an insult, if you will. Hamlet insulting the king by turning to his mother and saying, I will obey you. Claudius, he can persuade, he can try to attempt to persuade me, but he can't do that. Uh, Claudius is Hamlet's stepfather. Interesting, isn't it, that here we have a kind of, a romantic a tale here in which we don't have a wicked stepmother, but we have Claudius, who in Hamlet's eyes is a wicked stepfather. Just an interesting note there. We can discuss that later if you like. Um, well, the king rejoices at Hamlet to conceding and giving in, and saying, yes, mother, I will stay if that's what you wish. And the king says, let's party, let's celebrate. And he, uh, he and his mother and the rest of the court, they exit the stage, off to celebrate that Hamlet has agreed to stay at court. And Hamlet is left alone on stage for his first soliloquy. And Hamlet, over the course of the play, has seven soliloquies. I don't know, does he have more soliloquies than the other? Uh, uh, than the other the other tragic heroes, Macbeth and King Lear. I'm not sure about that, but seven. He has quite a few soliloquies in the play. It'll be an interesting topic for topic option B if you wanted. You could look at any one of Hamlet's seven soliloquies and do an in-depth analysis of it and ask yourself, why is this soliloquy in the play? What does it reveal? For example, what does it reveal about Hamlet's situation or his character? What insights does it provide? So that would be an interesting topic to explore if you wish to choose option B. But returning to Hamlet's soliloquy, remember again, a soliloquy is a theatrical convention. A character is alone on stage, and so that we sitting in the audience can have access to what the character is thinking and feeling, the character speaks aloud, even though he or she is alone on the stage. Nevertheless, the character speaks aloud so that we have access. Once again, this is the problem of knowing the other mind, isn't it? Knowing what someone is thinking and feeling. But here, Shakespeare takes care of that problem for us because, he uses the soliloquy so that we do have access into Hamlet's thoughts. And it's here that Hamlet we see all his emotions, all this pent up hostility, this rage, this bitterness, this disgust with everyone at court. It just comes gushing forth, pouring out. It's like the floodgates open as the dam breaks, and you really we see how he truly feels and what he truly thinks of the king and his mother and the rest of the people at the court, the courtiers. And he says here, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. There's a fascinating image here, this idea of Hamlet longing for non-existence. He imagines this flesh that's too solid flesh, this impossibility of his flesh simply melting and thawing and resolving itself into a dew, into something liquid, into something, right, no longer solid, no longer of substance. He really does long for non-existence. He no longer wishes to be. Um, And even in those lines, this idea of resolving it, the flesh resolving itself into a do. Hamlet here is punning on the word adieu, right? Because in French, adieu means goodbye. Hamlet wishes to say goodbye to this world. He has this world no longer has any. He has no interest whatsoever. He no longer has any interest whatsoever in this world, and he longs to exit. He wants to exit the world. If he could just walk off the stage, if he just walked through the exit door here, how convenient that would be. But his flesh is too solid. It's the physicality here of existence. It prevents him. It isn't going to simply thaw and melt and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. And here again we see Hamlet's Christian upbringing, his belief in an everlasting and eternal God, the Christian God, who is a creator God, a God who creates life, and therefore only the God who creates life, has the power to destroy that life. And so the very idea of self-slaughter, of suicide, is considered to be a sin that's punishable by an eternity in hell, eternal damnation. So Hamlet's sort of caught, isn't he? He longs to escape this existence, but he fears an afterlife. He fears punishment, eternal punishment, in a place of uh, uh, torture and torment, a place called hell, the Christian hell. And so he's caught, isn't he? He can't escape. He can't take his own life. He can't escape this world. This brings up the controversial issue of suicide. I don't want to discuss that in too much detail today. We'll turn to that issue when we look at the most famous of Hamlet's soliloquies, the to be or not to be soliloquy. We'll discuss this issue of suicide, the controversial issue of suicide. But do keep that in mind. It might be a topic idea some of you want to explore for option C. You can remember, choose a controversial issue that the play raises and argue, take a position and argue for that position. So the idea of suicide, in particular, this notion of physician-assisted suicide. Uh, but anyway, I don't want to digress. I want to stay on the fairway today. I don't want to slice the ball off into the rough here. It might take me too long to get back onto the fairway. So let's see. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. So the law, right? A good Christian, a Christian who wishes to be rewarded eternally by ascending into heaven, by going upstairs rather than downstairs, right? Descending into hell, that place of eternal torment of fire and brimstone and sulfur and so forth. If a Christian wishes to get into heaven, then he has to suffer through this world. Or again, once again, there's that idea that the Christian Orthodox Christianity sees the world as a kind of crucible, a kind of place where one is tested to see if one can remain faithful. And so the question of ending one's life the idea of ending one's life is forbidden according to the Christian canon. Uh, yes. Oh God, God. And notice how he cries out to his God. I mean, he's feeling helpless. He needs, he's calling out for his heavenly Father. I mean, he's lost his earthly father. And now he's calling out to his heavenly Father. Remember, once again, we are here in a patriarchal world. This is a patriarchal order, a system that we find ourselves in the Hamletian world, and it's dominated by men all the way down the ladder, all the way down the chain. Right at the top, you've got the heavenly Father, the Christian God, who is male, And then you have the stepfather, in this case Claudius. The stepfather rules the state, the kingdom, and he's put in position. It's the divine right. He has the divine right to rule because he's been elected by the Christian God to rule. And so the king also, the state father is male, and then you have the family father who governs, who is the authority in the household. So here we have Hamlet now turning to his heavenly father because he's lost his earthly father. He's who was both the state father as well as Hamlet's the family father, right? And here he turns to his heavenly father and cries out, "Oh God, God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world." And notice those adjectives that keep coming, those descriptions of this world. It's this world Hamlet is having a problem with. This world is not the world he imagined it to be. I mean, we can speculate on what Hamlet's life, what his existence was like before the death of his father. I mean, before the death of his father, remember the axes of art. Hamlet's living in a romantic comedy, if you will, right? All is going well in his world. Life is good. He worships his father. He sees his father as a great king, as a good Christian king as well, as a great military hero. He adores his mother. He sees her not only as, he believes that her physical beauty is an indication of her inner beauty, that she is a woman of great character. She's good and loving. And so she's not only physically beautiful, he admires her physical beauty, but that indicates that represents her inner beauty as well, her constancy, her faith, her her loyalty to her husband. He sees his mother's and father's relationship as sanctified by the Christian God. It's blessed, it's a sacred union. And he believes that his mother and father have achieved, they are experiencing true love. That remember, the romantics believes that love is the greatest of all emotions, and that when two people romantic love, when two people romantic desire, when two people come together, that it's a union of souls. It's finding one's soulmate, and it's all preordained and destined. There's one special, unique person in the world waiting just for you and just for me. And it's the idea that uh, uh, Gertrude and Hamlet's father, the former Hamlet, the elder King Hamlet, that their relationship uh, uh, was blessed. Was it was a holy matrimony, a holy union that was blessed by the Christian God. And so Hamlet, his relationship with his family, with his mother and father, very good relationship with both. As we said, he worships his father. He admires his mother. He's devoted to his mother. He's in love. He imagines himself in love with Ophelia, and again, she appears to reciprocate that love. He believes he has found his soulmate in life. He's a young man. He's healthy. He's energetic. He's a scholar. He's studying at the university, like you studying at college here. He's off finding himself, discovering who he is. Wanting to discover who's there. Who are you? He wants to know what to do with his life, how to proceed, how can he best function in the world, how can he be productive, what can he contribute to the world. So yes, everything's going quite well for Hamlet. He imagines, he's living a very contented, satisfied life. He's wealthy, he's privileged, he is the Prince of Denmark, he's next in line to the throne. Everything's going smoothly for him. And then his father dies, and he returns to court, and he finds that his mother has married Claudius, his uncle, a man he cannot stand. That man of personal ambition, that man who schemes, uses his intelligence only to promote himself, only to advance his own power, his own control. And once he has that power, he wants to only to keep that, maintain that power. And so he finds that his mother has not only married Claudius, his father's brother, but she it seems to have forgotten his father already. And in addition, Claudius is now the king. So Hamlet's world, his romantic vision. Well, not his romantic vision. I mean, he's still a man of faith. He still believes in the Christian God, and he still believes that there is ultimately, in the end, a moral order will assert itself, and good will triumph over evil. And he does believe, he still imagines miracles, and he still believes in the Christian heaven and the Christian hell. So he hasn't lost his romantic view of the world, but he's no longer a character whose plot line is unfolding toward the comic uh, 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 pole of the horizontal axis in the axis of art, right? Instead, it's taken a sharp U-turn, and he's headed toward the tragic end, right? Uh, Remember his life. He feels as if his life has been it's become catastrophic, right? Nothing is ordered any longer, and existence no longer appeals to him. His suffering has become too great. His pain, his psychological torture, his pain has overwhelmed him. His emotions, his he's tormented by what's occurred, and he no longer has any confidence in life. He no longer sees life as a positive, and he no longer has any confidence in human beings. He no longer believes that the human project is something which needs to be continued. We need to carry on with it. He sees humans now as corrupt. He sees the world as corrupt. This would be another cause I think you can explore in writing your essay, and that would be Hamlet's disillusionment with this world and with the people in this world. And again, it distracts him from his purpose, from the commandment, the order, the directive that the ghost will give him. It's going to distract him because he's going to constantly be seeing, wallowing in this new understanding of life and of human beings. It's no longer this comic plot line that's unfolding before him, but rather a tragic plot line. So that would be another causal factor that you could explore in your essay. But to continue here, look what he says next. This is yeah, I wanted to mention, the idea that this world is weary to Hamlet. It's stale. It's flat. Notice the adjectives keep piling up. It's unprofitable. He can't find any purpose in this world, in existence, in this life. It's weary. It's stale. It's flat. It has no use. He doesn't know how to proceed, how to move forward. It seems to him, it seems to me, from his perspective, he can't find any use in this world. And that's going to cause him to delay. And look what he says next about this world. Violet, fie, 'tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. And here we have the allusion, right, to the Garden of Eden. And Hamlet being a Christian, he would be familiar with the biblical story of the Garden of Eden and the fall of mankind. This idea that the garden, Hamlet is living in a kind of paradise before the death of his father. His existence, he's living a kind of Edenic existence, isn't he? A kind of paradisical existence before the fall. But when death uh, uh, occurs, when he's confronted with death, the death of his father, suddenly the garden becomes overrun with weeds. It grows to seed. And the weeds here, of course, are metaphors for people like Claudius and Polonius. Claudius's number one man, Claudius's henchmen, if you will, men who are politically ambitious, men who want to grab and to take, men who are after their, or who are seeking their interest and their needs, and they don't matter. It doesn't matter, whom they steamroll over. in grabbing what they want and what they want to take. So this is the garden that's grown to seed, is unweeded, and this is the allusion here to the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. Only the moral order, right? It's now chaos. It's disorder. There is no justice in this world. There is no fairness. Right? People like Claudius have ascended to power, and people like his father, the good, right? The good have lost power. The good have been vanquished, and people like Claudius. In this world, again, the storyline in this world, people like Claudius and people like Polonius, men like Claudius and men like Polonius, they're the ones now in control. They hold the reins to power here. It is an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not two. It's reminding he says his father hasn't even been dead 2 months. And look how everyone's misbehaving. So excellent a king that was to this, he's referring to his uncle. So excellent a king that was to this, Hyperion to a satyr. His father was Hyperion. Notice the metaphor here. His father was Hyperion was one of the 12 Greek titans, right? One of the 12 gods that were known as the Titans. That's where we get the idea of the Titanic, right? The Titans were gods, and they symbolized power and strength and authority. This was his father, a man in charge, a great king, a powerful king, a man who defeated a warrior who defeated the king of Norway in hand-to-hand combat on the battlefield. That's how he sees his father, Hyperion. Remember, Hyperion also is a creator god. Hyperion creates the sun and the moon and the dawn. So Hyperion is the god who creates light. Hyperion symbolizes light and reason and wisdom and truth, all the things that we conventionally associate with light. Hamlet sees his father this way as well. So not only does Hamlet see his father's the elder King Hamlet, not only as a great and powerful monarch, as a man of military prowess and courage, bravery, a man who's proved himself on the battlefield, but he also sees his father as a source of wisdom, a source of light, a source of reason, and a kind of creator God, a source of goodness as well, a good Christian. Hyperion to a satyr. And if Hamlet views his father as Hyperion, one of the Greek Titan gods, well, Claudius is the satyr. And this is a reference to those Greek gods. They were woodland gods, and they were gods that were half animal, half beast. I believe in Greek mythology, the Greek stories went that they were half horse. They had the lower body of a horse, the tail of a horse, and the ears of a horse, and the upper body of a man. I think that was yes, that's Greek mythology, right? In Roman mythology, the satyrs were half goat and half man. Again, with the lower body of a goat and the upper body, the horns of a goat, and the upper body of a man with goat's horns. But a satyr was one of these woodland gods, a lower order god that was lustful and a drunken god that spent all its time partying in the woods and hunting down nymphs and raping young virginal nymphs. So this is how he sees his uncle. So he has an idealized view of his father, we could argue, and he has a rather warped view of Claudius. He sees his father as what? What do I want to say here? The personification of evil, and he sees his father, or he sees his Claudius rather, as a kind of melodramatic villain. The ones with a black mustache and that are pure evil. This is the way Hamlet sees these two brothers. Hyperion to a satyr, so loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. So his father was also a devoted husband, a kind and loving husband who was almost paints a picture of a paternalistic man, husband, a man who treats his wife as as a child. And again, we are in a patriarchal world, so women had very little, if any, power. I mean, Gertrude's power as a queen is mostly nominal. It's power in name only, and the relationship between the king and queen, between Hamlet and Gertrude. Hamlet is the King Hamlet, the elder King Hamlet is going to dominate that relationship, and because it is a patriarchal world where the men do dominate, they do rule over women. So it almost sounds, although Hamlet doesn't note this, but it almost sounds that the relationship, at least perhaps from Gertrude's perspective, might have been a bit suffocating. Um, she certainly was completely at completely controlled by the elder King Hamlet, a man who would, was overly protective of her, treating her perhaps like a child. That's why I said he was had a sort of paternalistic relationship with her. Why she, his mother? Why she? Must I remember? He cries, heaven and earth. He cries out to both heaven and to earth. Must I remember? Why she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on, and yet within a month, let me not think on it. Frailty, thy name is woman. Notice how before it was 2 months, no less than 2 months. Now it's within a month. And again, his mother appears to have deceived not only his father in Hamlet's view, but Hamlet and everyone else. She appeared to have doted on his father, to have loved him equally in return, and to have genuinely cared for him. Yet within a month now, she remarries. And Hamlet generalizes at this point, if his mother can behave in such a fashion, if she can be so false, so deceptive, so shallow, if you will, so superficial, unfaithful, then all women must be capable of that. Frailty, thy name is woman. So here he generalizes, if his mother can behave this way, then certainly all women, because Hamlet had, idolized his mother as well. Certainly not to the extent that he worshipped his father, or still does worship his father, but nevertheless. But now he sees Gertrude as unfaithful and insincere. He believes her to have been false. And she is her inconstancy is what he most disturbs him. It seems perhaps that he's thinking that Gertrude, that his mother made a fool of his father, uh, that she didn't really truly care for him. Look how he describes his mother. He continues, a little month. And again, he repeats. Remember Shakespeare, when he wants to get a point across, he repeats words and phrases. A little month. Now it's a little month. Within a month, a little month. A little month. Or ere those shoes were old with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears. And here this reference to Niobe in Greek mythology. She was a woman who bragged about how many children she had, and that the gods in anger punished her for bragging, and they killed each one of her children. I think she had more than a dozen children, and the gods kill all of her children because of her arrogance, her bragging about how fertile she was. She was more fertile than the gods themselves, and so the gods punish her. But then Niobe becomes so distressed and so miserable and sorrowful over the loss of all of her children that she weeps uncontrollably, and she ceaselessly, the gods take pity on her and they change her into a stone. But that isn't enough. I mean, the stone then begins to weep. So Niobe becomes symbolic of this deep, deep grief that's one can't rein in, one can't control, that is continuous. And this is how Hamlet says this is how his mother behaved. She behaved like Niobe in following his father's body to be buried. She cried. Her tears were like Niobe's tears, and yet it was all uh, uh, pretense. It wasn't true in Hamlet's understanding here. And then he repeats, "Oh God, a beast, no, like Niobe, all tears, why even she," and then he interrupts himself, "Oh God, a beast that wants discourse of reason would have mourned longer." She's behaved worse than an animal, and animals lack this ability to reason, to understand, to comprehend what it means, what death means, what loss means, the loss of a loved one means. And here she's behaving, all right, uh, uh, worse than an animal because she has the ability, being human, she has the capacity to understand what it means, what death means, to comprehend the finality of it here. Married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. And again, yet another reference to a character out of Greek legend, Hercules here. Obviously, Hamlet has been studying ancient Greece, uh, Greek history. He's been studying the classics while he's been away at the university because he references the Greeks here 3, 4 times in this first soliloquy of his. Um, and we're going to see why Shakespeare uh, gives Hamlet this interest in classical, uh, ancient Greek and ancient Rome, classical antiquity. Remember, we've already said that Hamlet is not the stereotypical avenger, the classical avenger, the ancient Greek or Roman who, was a man of action and would not hesitate, would not pause, would not procrastinate in order to fulfill that commandment of revenge. Within a month, again, there's that repetition. Within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her galled eyes, she married. Oh, most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. Interesting, this idea of incest, incestuous sheets. Here again is Hamlet's Christian upbringing. This is a reference to Leviticus, yeah, Leviticus. You'll have to Google it. I don't remember which chapter and verse. Uh, Probably should. I was raised in the Bible Belt in the South in North Carolina, so I should probably remember chapter and verse. But it's the idea that if a man should marry his brother's wife when his brother dies, that the marriage would be considered to be impure, and that the man that marries his brother's wife would it would be thought of as dishonoring his brother. So Claudius has committed that offense. His mother has committed that offense. They've dishonored the family name, the name of Hamlet. Dishonored the name. And that's all important to Hamlet. So, what is this idea of Hamlet repeating again and again? This idea of within a month, within a month. It's because they've argued that one causes Hamlet's grief over the loss of his father. That's one cause for his delay, for why he procrastinates. But I think it's more than just grief over the loss of his father. I think he's lost something else, though he's unaware of it. It's only at the subconscious level, this conflict, this loss that he's experiencing. It hasn't appeared in his consciousness. Right? It's only at the subconscious level that it's disturbing him, and that would be what uh, we can refer to as this idea that he's had to confront death and the reality of what death indicates. And so I'll turn you to the board here. This idea of the denial of death, This is the first term on your final exam, the denial of death. And it's in psychology, this idea of the denial of death. The idea is that we human beings, we're the only animals on the planet who realize, who understand, can conceive of death. We're the only animals that know that we're going to die. And that produces in each of us, or most of us, I would imagine, it produces an anxiety, a fear, this idea that we're going to cease to exist. And so we develop particular strategies to deny this fact, to not face the reality, to not face this brutal fact that we're each going to cease to exist, we're each going to come to an end. And there are a number of strategies that people engage in order to deny this fact, to deny their own mortality. The first strategy is called isolation. And this is where we isolate thoughts of death. We don't speak about death. We don't talk about it. We try not to. We even avoid language. We even avoid words like death and dying when we converse with one another, when we speak with one another. We try to lock up thoughts of death in the attic of our brain. We try to lock up these thoughts, isolate them up there in the attic, lock them up, and then throw away the key. I notice, for example, whenever someone associated with the community college dies, I invariably get an email, and the email is always phrased that so and so has passed away rather than so and so has died. This expression "passed away" is used because it's a kind of euphemism, right, for dying, for died. The word itself, some people don't like to use. Just mentioning that word death or dying, people will, a lot of my former friends would complain that they would accuse me of being morbid because I would discuss death and dying and would, philosophize about it, and talk about it, and think about it. And they said, "Oh, why are you so morbid? Why are you talking about that? And let's talk about something else." They would become very upset with me. So isolation is one of the strategies, one of the ways we scheme, trying to trying not to look at, trying not to look death squarely in the face, trying not to see it clearly, trying not to look at it realistically. Distraction is a second way, a second strategy, a second maneuver that we use. We keep busy, right? Busy little bees. We have the word busyness, and that's what we do daily. We go about our routines, keeping busy. We get up and we have things to do and places to go and people to see. All right, we go to school, we go to work, we come home, we spend time with family, we have our hobbies, our entertainment. Uh, we just keep busy. We distract ourselves so that we don't have to think about how ultimately our stories are going to end. And this new phenomenon of people spending all their time on cell phones. It's, video games, movies, television, and now the cell phone. People are distracting themselves so they don't have to think. They don't have to have these thoughts uh, come to them and disturb them, upset them. And then we have sublimation. I know that's a fancy pantsy word, but all it means is that we confront death as a way of avoiding it. We confront it in art, in literature. We confront it in philosophy. We confront it. We think we're confronting it directly, but we're really not. We're looking at it, indirectly. We're looking at it from, you know, we're looking at it from it's a side glance. All right, let me see if I can explain what I mean. Well, the, King Lear, for example, is another Shakespearean tragedy. And at the end of that play, the king, Lear, he enters the stage with his daughter in his arms, and she's dead. and he enters the stage, and he cries out, in agony and in horror that his daughter has died, and he's holding her in his arms. And we sitting in the stage, the audience, we think, oh well, you see, I can confront death. I'm looking at death right now. I can, right? I'm up to the challenge. I can face death. But we're not really experiencing death firsthand, are we? I mean, it isn't our daughter our dead daughter in our arms that we're carrying. It isn't the reality. It's just, right? It's a fictional world we're looking at. We think we're confronting death directly. We're looking at it, that we have the courage to face it, but we're not really. We're seeing it, we're looking at it indirectly with that sort of side skewed glance, right? That we're looking at it askew, right? That's how or when we're philosophizing right now, when we're talking about death, philosophizing about death, thinking about it, what it means and what it is, and we're sort of thinking about it in an abstract way, aren't we? We're not really experiencing death when we philosophize about it. So sublimation is just a way of kidding ourselves. We're fooling ourselves if we think we're confronting death directly, because it's not the actual experience itself that we're facing. And then finally, the second term on the list of concepts for your final exam is the immortality project. And this is what I think. This is the fourth cause today that you could explore. That this is what's happening to Hamlet. He's lost his immortality project. And let me explain what I mean. Oh, well, actually, I skipped one here, didn't I? Anchoring. Well, anchoring is another way that we try to escape death. We by becoming part of something larger than ourselves, so that each of us individually may die, but we become part of something bigger and greater than ourselves that will live on past our deaths, and in that way we avoid ultimately avoid death. For example, we become part of a particular group, a family, the family, a community, a state, a country. We become part of a political party or a part of a religion. Uh, there's another way that we escape death too. If you think for the romantic imagines that death it is just the death of the physical body. The romantic is a dualist, imagining that there's both a non-physical essence to each human being, in addition to the physical body, and that the physical body may die, but the non-physical, the so-called soul, lives on after the death of the body. So there is a way the realist would argue there is another way that the romantic attempts to escape the truth concerning death. What all the scientific evidence and philosophical reasoning points to uh, is this. So there is this idea of anchoring, and this is this idea of people can anchor themselves in a particular religion and a particular romantic view of the world and escape death that way. And then there's the immortality project. And this is what I would argue is what's happening with Hamlet. Hamlet has lost his immortality project. And an immortality project, it's the idea that, well, each of us is going to die. We know this, but we go about trying to make a name for ourselves, a name that will somehow live on after we are gone. And in that sense, we become immortal, or so we think we become immortal. So, for example, there are all sorts of immortality projects out there, but you sort of go on. It's kind of like it's a sort of heroic quest that each of us goes on to become immortal. To even though we're going to physically come to an end, we can live on in the memories of other people, in the minds of other people. We can be memorialized for all eternity. We can be immortalized. And it's the idea that there are different ways that you can do that. Some people want to attain great power and build skyscrapers to themselves, and at the top of those skyscrapers write Trump right? And they immortalize themselves. That's their immortality project. It's through acquiring power and wealth and position. We can see this desire to make a name for oneself, and that's one route to do it, become rich and famous. Another way might be become a great artist, to become a great actor, or a great writer, or a dancer, or singer, or whatever it might be, right? We'll win the voice and we'll make a great name for ourselves, or we'll win America's dance contest, or we'll win that Academy Award, and everyone remembers. Um, Sports is another way that another strategy people use to immortalize themselves. They'll become a great athlete. They'll hit the most home runs or score the most touchdowns, and they'll go into the Hall of Fame, the record books, and everyone will remember them after they die. So there are all sorts of heroic quests. We're the hero. We're the center of our stories, and we're the hero. We're the ones on that quest. We're the ones establishing this name that will endure long, long, long after we ourselves cease physically to exist. Love is another quest. Remember Romeo and Juliet? They die, yes, of course, but they imagine that their love will immortalize them. Right? They will be remembered for all eternity because they were willing to die for one another. So great was their love, so passionate their desire for each other, that that idea, their love will allow them to be remembered long, long after they they die. So Hamlet has lost his immortality project. Hamlet has imagined that he is going to become the next great king, that he's going to become the next great Hamlet, just like his father. Remember, Hamlet worships his father. He idolizes. He calls him Hyperion, the Greek Titan. He idealizes his father. Hamlet's father is everything to him. Just a moment. Lily, hush! Hush your bosh, Lily! Behave! Well, all right. And Hamlet has lost his immortality project, as I was saying, because his father to Hamlet his father has immortalized himself, has been this great king, this good king, this military warrior, this devoted husband, devoted, loving father, loving king, and has been this great and good man. And he Hamlet imagined that his father would be remembered for quite some time to come, that his name had been immortalized. And here, within a month, a little month, not even a month, everyone is forgotten. Everyone has moved on. And Hamlet, in his project, is one in which has wished to emulate his father, to become the next great king, to establish that name for himself, so that he too, like his father, will be remembered. Now, I don't think Hamlet is conscious of this, right? Because again, Hamlet, remember, he's raised to believe, he's raised again, and he's raised to, as a Christian prince, he's raised to just to be meek and humble, and not to seek, not to be ambitious, not to seek fame, not to seek glory, not to imagine other idols before his God. No other God should come before the Christian God. But Hamlet has worshipped his father as if he were a god, has put his father, if you will, before the Christian God. And Hamlet himself imagines that he too, again at the subconscious level, that in emulating his father, he will become like his father. He will model his life after his father's life. He will become the next great king. And in so doing, he will establish his own immortality. He will become immortal. And this idea, the loss of his immortality project, again, this is occurring at the subconscious level, is the reason why he can't find any purpose in life any longer. Life doesn't make sense to him anymore. Everyone's forgotten his father within a month. Now Claudius is on the throne, and his mother's even forgotten his father. And so Hamlet, again, subconsciously, is fearful that the project itself, doomed from the start, that we're all forgotten in the end. Even Shakespeare, the immortal bard himself, where will he be in a million years, a billion years, a zillion years, a googolplex number of years? And the realist would say in the end, everything will be obliterated. Everything that exists in our world will be annihilated and obliterated, wiped out, gone. So the immortality project, the realist says all of these ways that we as romantics, I think we all, even realists undergo they attempt these projects, but the difference is the realist knows that it's doomed to failure. But we're all these biological organisms, and we're competitive. It's part of the function, this competitiveness that's in us, this immortality project, this desire to plume up our feathers and strut our stuff and become somebody important and significant. But the romantic imagines that ultimately death can be denied one way or another. The immortality project. Remember, Hamlet is a romantic, and he's not aware that he's been on this immortality project. That is this has been his goal, his quest. But suddenly, uh, again, at that subconscious level, at that level of unawareness, his project has come crashing. It's just gone up in flames. And that would be a fourth cause. And I'll stop with that cause today. A fourth cause that you can explore. You'll see that feature appear again in the play. So here we'll stop at Act One. We'll end here with Hamlet, a man who is conflicted. Uh, you know, he's feeling trapped. Denmark is a prison. How is this conflict going to be resolved? What is going to happen to Hamlet next? And we're going to see that the conflict, before it is ultimately resolved, is only going to deepen. It's only going to grow. The conflict is only going to become greater for Hamlet because he's about to be visited by a supernatural entity. He's about to meet a supernatural being that claims to be a ghost, the ghost of the former King Hamlet, the ghost of Hamlet's father. Be gone before somebody drops the house on you. Hi, John.